Hello and welcome back. Today we're continuing our look at the top 10 breakout fantasy players from 23-24, and today we're up to number 3, and this is a player that I hinted at the end of my last video that may be talked about a little bit in upcoming free agency, and that is Seth Jarvis, and that's because he's a restricted free agent, and there are rumblings out there about Natchez and a potential offer sheet situation there. I wonder about Jarvis as well, and to get a taste of why GMs should think about it, let's dive into his file. So in 2020, the Toronto Maple Leafs were trying to get some cap relief, and they decided it was worth a first-round pick to get rid of Patrick Marleau. That pick ended up being used to select Seth Jarvis 13th overall after he put up 98 points in 58 games with Portland of the WHL. Now, this is still a point of contention for Leafs fans who view the trade as yet another boondoggle that has prevented them from getting over the hump in the playoffs. But for the Canes, it was a young player that they injected right into their lineup and almost provided immediate results. So in 2021, he played 9 games in the AHL, 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points in those 9 games. He was then sent back to junior for some reason and averaged more than a point per game there. But ultimately, he proved he was ready for the NHL. So in 21-22, his first full NHL season, Jarvis tallied 40 points in 68 games in the regular season and an impressive 8 points in 14 playoff games. He followed that up with a bit of a sophomore slump, registering 39 points in 82 games, but that did showcase his durability. Now, he also continued his playoff excellence by scoring 5 goals and 5 assists for 10 points in 15 games in the Canes' run to the conference final. In 23-24, he broke out in a big way, scoring 33 goals and 34 assists for 67 points in 81 games, again showing his durability, but also that he can be a goal scorer at the NHL level. Once again, when the playoffs came around, his play elevated as he notched 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points in 11 games before being ousted by the Rangers in the second round. Just had to throw that in there. Now, as we look at his player hub, the first thing that I notice is that he's 95th percentile in goals. As I mentioned, 33 goals on the season is really nice to have, and you're going to want to target those goal-scoring wingers, and he's a guy that you may be able to get outside of the top couple rounds. So this is an interesting file for that reason alone. That .41 goal per game is a 33 goal pace over 82, and that's because he played 81 games. He ended up with 33 goals exactly. So his durability is the next thing I notice. 82 games the previous season, 81 games last year. You like to have those guys that aren't going to get injured because obviously you want those guys in your lineup, especially when it matters the most. And he's a goal scorer who's going to be in your lineup more often than not, almost every single game over the last 2 seasons. Now, the next thing that I notice is his power play production and how much it jumped from year to year. So 5 power play points, 6 power play points, and he jumps up to 20 power play points with 13 power play goals. And you can visualize that by looking at last year. This purple line right here, 63rd percentile, hardly any power play production. And then he jumps up all the way to 89th percentile on the power play. That's a nice piece of business to have on your roster. You can get a guy who's a goal-scoring, point producer, but also a power play goal producer. So if you're in a points league with power play goal weighting or power play point weighting, a little bit heavier, he's a guy that you can definitely rely on for that. And then the last thing that probably shouldn't be the last thing to notice with this file is his hitting. 1.42 hits per game, 65th percentile there. Amongst forwards, that percentile is a little bit higher. But one of the things that you notice when you go back to 22-23, he's below a hit per game there. So he increased that significantly, and that's something that you like to see him rounding out his game. He's always had that goal scoring potential. He's at 17, 14, now up to 33 goals. The points have been there. The assists have been pretty consistent. He took a jump there as well. The point totals in general have jumped up. And then on top of that, he's still adding to his game with hits. And then on top of all of that, if you're in a league that plays plus minus, he's been a plus player since he came into the league. Plus 11, plus 10, up to a plus 23. I don't like playing with plus minus, but some people do play with it. And if you're in a league with it, you want these guys that are on these teams that are going to be very, positive teams in terms of plus minus. Obviously, Carolina's not going to they're going to have to do something in the offseason. They're not going to be the same exact team that they were last year, but they're typically a good team in the regular season every single year. They just struggle in the playoffs, which is something that a lot of teams deal with. Toronto, the Rangers all come to mind when I think of teams that are very good regular season but fade off in the playoffs. But for fantasy purposes, this is nice to have as well. Only thing he doesn't really do is block shots, but that's not quite as important. Shot volume is a little touch low for what I like to get. I like to be above 2.5 shots per game, but he's been consistent here. So 2.17, you look back the previous year, 2.28. So he's had that shot volume, and now the goals are going in a little bit more for him, and he's getting that power play time. That could probably add to that goal total jump from year to year. So he has been a shooter. He is a goal scorer. He's hitting now. He's on the power play. And then he's only 22 years old. So if Carolina does lose some players like Teravainen, Necas, he could see an even bigger role. And the last thing I want to touch on is the line assignment. So Martinook, Stahl, and Jarvis led the team in goals by a single line last year with 13 goals amongst them as a line. But tied for second was the line of Gensel, Aho, and Jarvis, who saw a lot less time together. They only played 15 games, but they produced 12 goals. Now, I'm recording this on the night of the draft, so depending what happens in free agency, if Gensel stays and that line is intact, that could provide huge upside for Jarvis next year in fantasy. So keep an eye out for what happens with Jake Gensel. If he stays in Carolina, that's a signal to go out and try to grab Seth Jarvis. Last year, Jarvis was drafted around 170 in redraft leagues. He will certainly get taken much earlier than that this year. I would look for him anywhere near or after the 5th round in a 12-team league. But what are you thinking goes on this year? Where do you try to target him in your fantasy drafts? That's going to do it for this one. We're in the home stretch. Stay tuned for number 2 on this list in the coming days. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.